Hello everybody, and welcome to another tutorial on the introduction to Roblox scripting in ROBLOX Lua. In today's episode, we're going to go over another type of loop called the repeat loop. And it's going to be fairly similar, and I'm going to do some contrasts with the while loop. So if you haven't seen, or if you don't understand while loops, please go and watch my infinite loop tutorial and my finite loop tutorial. They'll be very helpful for this episode. So a repeat loop today is going to be the main topic, and I want to start off by showing you exactly what a repeat loop is. So if we have repeat, let's go ahead and say wait 5 seconds after saying print. Repeat says hi, okay? And we're going to wait until false, okay? So I have just written an infinite loop. Much like in my infinite loop tutorial where I had while true do something, I have just written an infinite loop that will print repeat says hi to the output every 5 seconds. Let me explain. Alright, so a repeat loop starts out by saying repeat. That's the key word that says, okay Lua, here's a repeat loop, get ready for it. And I failed by clicking. So it says repeat. After the repeat, you give the body, the block of the loop, the part of the loop that gets done every single time the loop basically executes and runs itself, okay? And I don't mean executes like cuts its head off. I mean executes as in like in computers. When I say execute, that means run, do, basically, okay? It's like putting a plan into action. So here's the block of code that's in this loop. And I know we don't have like a do ... end like we do in the for loop or the while loop. That's just not really necessary in a repeat loop. So in a repeat loop, you just say repeat something until, here's where the condition is, until a condition equals true. Okay? So a repeat loop, you write repeat, you then give the body of the function. Most of the time, you'll actually see the body of a repeat loop being on one line, like this. Okay, this is a very typical way of seeing a repeat loop, but it's not a very good way to show you when you're first learning what a repeat loop is. So we're going to go back to how I had it at the beginning. So we have repeat, and then we have our block of code that gets run every single time the loop goes through itself. And then we have until, okay? This is much like in a while loop. You have while, condition, do. So as long as the condition in a while loop is true, it's going to keep doing it. In contrast, a repeat loop says repeat something until something is true. So a while loop does something as long as the condition is true. A repeat loop will only do it as long as the condition is false. Okay, so it does it until, this is how until makes sense. A repeat loop will do its loop until a condition is true. And this is how I created an infinite loop. This is going to constantly repeat, print, repeat says hi, every 5 seconds, forever, because this false will never be true. So I'm going to prove that to you by pressing play right here. Repeat says hi, we're going to wait about 5 seconds here because, well, we have a wait 5. Then we see repeat says hi again. Then wait another 5 seconds. Repeat says hi. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Repeat says hi. So there we go. We see that it's an infinite loop. It's constantly going to be saying repeat says hi, waiting 5 seconds, and doing it again. Because the condition will never be true. It's repeating this until the condition's true, which is never going to happen. Here's the contrast, another contrast with a while loop though. Let's go ahead and see what would happen if the condition started out as being true. What if it looked like this? Repeat says hi, wait 5 seconds, the condition is true. Is it going to work like a while loop where, let me prove this to you quickly, while false do, print, while says hi, oh, and then you go down here and wait 5 seconds. Is this loop up here, let's go ahead and comment this out. so I can prove this real quick. This loop should never print anything in the output, and I'll prove that. Clear the output, run. We do not see while says hi anywhere. It's not going to print it because the condition was false. And a while loop will only run as long as the condition is true. If we change this to true and we quickly ran this again, we'd see while says hi, we'd wait a couple seconds, and again we're going to see while says hi, and that's going to go on forever because it's an infinite loop. It's while true do. A repeat loop is different though. So if the condition is true for a repeat loop, keep in mind a repeat loop continues doing itself over and over and over until the condition is false, okay? So if the condition is true to begin with, will it work like a while loop? Where for a while loop we just proved that if a while loop's condition is false, it never does the block of the loop. In a repeat loop is the reverse true. If the condition for a repeat is initially true, does it do the condition or the block of code? The answer is yes, and I'm going to prove that to you. Here we go. Repeat says hi. Let's go ahead and just wait 5 seconds starting now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's been over 5 seconds, but just to prove even more, let's go ahead and wait another 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's been over 10 seconds now, and it still only says repeat says hi once. There's a reason for this, okay? And the reason for this is a repeat loop that has an initial condition of true isn't going to run itself. But it does run itself once, okay? So I'm going to draw up a quick analogy here, kind of similar to a fairly unrealistic but very nice English teacher, okay? So let's say you're in class and you have this English teacher who has assigned you to write an English paper. And this teacher's really nice. They're saying, you know what, you can keep revising your paper until I give you an A. I'll keep telling you, no, it's not good enough. Make some changes, okay? And then you keep going until I give you an A. That's a really nice teacher and probably never going to be found in the real world, but let's just live in this dreamland here for a moment. So you have this teacher. Now, you write your paper once, and then before you turn it in the first time, of course you revise it because it's the rough draft, and you don't want to turn in a rough draft. You'll get an F, right? There's probably grammar mistakes and a whole bunch of repeated words. It's just going to be a mess. So you revise your paper. After you revise your paper, you turn it in. And this teacher says, no, I'm sorry, this paper would get a C. Go ahead and take it back and do it again. And you revise it, and this time you get a B. Nope, not good enough. Go and do it again. And finally, you get an A. Okay, your teacher takes the paper, and you're done. You're no longer repeating the process of revising your paper. However, if we look at a slightly different version of the same analogy, so same teacher, different student now. Let's say this student writes his first rough draft, and again, he revises it one time because there's grammar mistakes and repeated words and all of that mess, okay? He gives the paper in. The very first time she, I don't care, they get an A. Okay, they're done. They don't revise it anymore. The teacher gave them an A on their first revision. They don't need to repeat revising it. Okay, so back to the repeat loop. This is kind of similar to that analogy of the English teacher who's extremely beyond human nice. Okay, a repeat loop, a repeat loop will go through its block of code once before it even checks its condition. Much like in my English teacher analogy, the student who got an A right away, actually both students, they wrote their rough draft, okay, and then they revised it. They did their block of code of revising it before they ever gave their paper to the teacher. Repeat loops are similar. A repeat loop will do what's in its block of code before it ever checks the condition. it will do it one time before it checks its condition, which is why it definitely runs at least once. We saw it says repeat says hi in the output one time before the condition was ever checked, and then it didn't say it again. Very similar to our student who got an A as soon as they first gave the revised paper to the teacher. However, we go back and we look at the other student, the student who got a C at first, and then a B, and then an A. So they wrote their paper, right? And then they revised it one time. Let's look at that as the block of code in the repeat loop, revising the paper. And then they give it to the teacher, they got a C. Okay, back to the repeat loop. The condition, the until condition is not true yet. So it does the loop again, and in our analogy, that means the student revises their paper again. Again, they hand in their paper, and they can check the condition, basically. They check the condition after they've done the loop. And they check the condition and say, okay, here, teacher, what grade did I get this time? And the teacher says, this would get a B. Go back and revise it again. So sorry, I hit the mic. The student loops through the revision loop, or the revision process again. And then again they check the condition. Is my paper good enough, teacher? The teacher says yes, it gets an A. Congratulations. And he doesn't revise it again. So a repeat loop works like that. It does the block of code and then it checks the condition. A while loop is different. A while loop checks the condition and then runs the code. A repeat loop runs the code and then checks the condition. So I hope you're seeing the difference here. Let's go ahead and look at a while loop in this English teacher analogy. A while loop is going to say, okay, you've written your paper, but you haven't revised it. It's the rough draft. It has the grammar mistakes and stuff probably. You turn it into the teacher without ever revising it. Typical teachers, this would likely get a D and you don't get the chance to revise it. But we're still keeping with our nice teacher. So the teacher says, sorry, this is going to get a D. You need to revise it. And in a while loop, it would keep revising it until it got an A, but it wouldn't revise it before it checked the condition. So that kid who got an A the first time, he might have gotten a C. He would have wrote the rough draft, given his paper to his teacher, and then gotten a C and be told to go back and revise it, and then get his A. But in our repeat loop, like version of doing this, I'm sorry, he writes his paper and then revises it and then checks if the teacher will give him an A. So those are the key differences between a repeat loop and a while loop. A while loop will not run the condition, will not run the code block until the condition is true. Or not until, unless the condition is true. As long as the condition is true, a while loop will keep repeating itself. A repeat loop, on the other hand, will run through its loop once, no matter what the condition is, and then it will keep doing it until the condition is true, at which point it will stop and it will continue on past the repeat loop. So hopefully this analogy sort of makes sense, where we have these students handing in their papers and getting them back and revising them in the context of these two different types of loops. Okay? So hopefully you guys enjoyed this tutorial. Hopefully it made sense. If it didn't, feel free to ask a question down below, or go to the forums at code.theorem.com/forums. Thank you again, guys, for watching, and I will catch you guys later.